So, hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Inner Insights, a conversation that I've been really looking forward to for some time. It's a deep pleasure to have Michael Ryan here on the podcast. I've known Michael the last number of years, a good few years now, Michael, isn't it? Through men's circles and a few other events and things. So, yeah, I really admire your work and I'm really looking forward to sharing it here in the podcast and having some good conversations that I think are quite apt for this moment in time with regards to men and how we are in the world. So I just want to introduce Michael. Michael brings over 2 decades of expertise as a dedicated yoga, breathwork and meditation teacher. Through movement-based practices, breathwork, meditation and tailored mentoring, Michael empowers men to cultivate healthier self-relationships and uncover deeper meaning in their lives. His workshops and retreats provide safe, transformative spaces to explore the layers of trauma carried by men, both intergenerational and collective, offering pathways towards healing and growth. So, Michael, you're very, very welcome. I'm really excited to hear all about your work at the moment in the world. But maybe we'll start with, how are you doing on this beautiful day?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I live in a little cabin down in the woods outside Gorey, and I live on a friend's land. So most mornings we get up and we go out and we do a nice practice, yoga practice in the morning with beautiful sunlight. It's waning a little now, but so I'm doing good. Yeah, I the way my week is generally structured is I get a few days down here and I do a bit of my admin stuff, but I tend to try to spend a lot of time sitting in this rocking chair. Um, and moving slowly. And then I have a 6-year-old who's up in Dublin. So then I go up on a Thursday and I hang out with him, and he comes down with me then on the Friday for the weekend. So that's generally how I roll, and I'm very grateful for the space that I have in my life and the opportunity to slow down. And it's been it's been hard earned, actually, to be honest. To have time to move slowly and to attend to the inner world, and that's obviously a big piece of how I move forward in terms of the work I do or try to do. It's informed by what I'm working with or moving through or experiencing in my inner landscape.
No, thanks for that, Michael. Yeah, it sounds idyllic. I've seen a few videos of you in the rocking chair, and it is well deserved, no doubt.
It's well appreciated for sure.
Yeah, and we were kind of just chatting there a little bit before, and I'm kind of in a similar place in my life as well. It feels like the slowing down is kind of like, for me, that's where the richness kind of is, because I think the whole world is just getting faster and faster. Even with AI, everything is just speeding up, it seems, for me. Time's going faster, things are moving quicker. And I think there's something so precious in the slowness, isn't there?
Yeah, like there's that adage of just getting to smell the roses, and we live in a culture that doesn't have much time for that. So much of our self-worth, and this is, I suppose, a big seminal piece when it comes to men. Quite often we can end up being the big achievers because the world is a difficult place and we need to put food on the table, and we get ourselves into situations in which there's a lot of responsibility and people to look after and bills to pay, and it's very easy to get caught in that in such a way that we're not attending to what it was within us. That like I was chatting to somebody last night about the idea that many people hold, that we don't change. We are the way we are, and my experience is when you do begin to really attend to the inner world, so much changes. You begin to realize that so much of what has been narrating or moving through you is, in some sense, has nothing to do with you, and that there is this deeper experience of, richness or connection, or that is waiting to be felt and experienced, and it requires a slowing down. It requires going against the modern current of our culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost a rebellious act to sit on the
Totally.
cushion and meditate.
Totally, it is, and it's like it's often seen as a luxury until somebody gets to the point at which it's just not working for them. And I think, I was just chatting to Dermot earlier this morning when we were talking about the idea that, we live in a culture in which you can get away with so much. It's like we live in a culture in which those deeper parts of us don't need, they can stay exiled and we can still get on with it, and we can be doing our job and doing our work, and lots of things can be working. And yet there's a price. I'm always grateful to the men who show up at retreats who are going through some sort of strife, or something isn't working, or something feels like it's missing. That level of sensitivity that's pointing them in the direction of attending to their inner world, attending to something deeper. And all the or a lot of the brokenness we see in the world, I think, is a result of not attending to those places,
Mm.
to those needs, to those voices, to those feelings that are asking for our attention. You know,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I see it as, a lot of, especially for men, it's like sometimes the emotions are almost too much to bear, so it's kind of just ignored, and then, there's a really big portion of men just numbing themselves out, to not feel those kind of deeper parts of themselves that, might have felt unsafe at one point, or weren't acceptable to express or access, and then they're just like forgot about.
yeah, like I think, and it also, that was one of those. I can't remember which one, but one of the guys that I follow on Instagram who works at Men, and he put it very beautifully in terms of talking about being a sensitive kid, being a kid that really felt, and the way he ended up protecting himself was creating this numbness, not having to feel all of those feelings because it was too much. And I suppose our culture is one in which we're told not to feel as men. We're told it's a weakness. Don't be like a girl. Don't feel, like all of these ideas around, how we should be, and then how that impacts how we are, our natural state of being. And even in the retreats, like the Saturday is the big day where a lot of work is done, and at the end of the day there'll always be a few guys who are like, like deers in the headlights, who are feeling a lot of stuff, like it's like the dam has broken open, and they're like, they're really uncomfortable with that. And yet it's the journey, it's part of that journey
Mm,
home to these places that can only stay exiled for so long without causing issue and causing damage. Um, and it is, like, as much as there's so much of us, the ways in which we've learned to avoid those places, or to fear those places, or to be worried that, look, if I go in there, I don't know what will happen. And yet that's where our aliveness is, that's where our richness is, that's where our capacity to recognize that the world has an adventure that it's asking us to live, and a richness that wants to come through each of us.
yeah,
And that's where the healing is for ourselves as individuals, but that's where the healing is for our community, for our world.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel that almost like a lot of men and also women are almost being, robbed of fully feeling. Like society is kind of curated in a way to just numb us out and just to get on with it. And we have this in in the Irish psyche, just get over it, get on with it, all this kind of, you know all these kind of sayings where, to really stop and be with yourself and to feel all those parts and to really tune in and to see what's right for you or what's wrong for you.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah, like there's definitely a lot of covertness in our, which we internalize. And
Yeah.
like I know with me and my journey, and going through and situations that have been exceedingly painful, and put me in a position where I've had no option but to look at places that I just didn't want to look at. I just didn't want to go near, and I had very divisive ways of avoiding them, and very intricate ways of not feeling and numbing out, and it was only through pain and going through that, into those places, that I just didn't have an option but just to sit in it. And it is uncomfortable work, and yet, and is easily avoidable if you're, like so much of what our culture offers us in terms of comfort, or that sense of security that allows us to avoid these places until you get to a point. Like, I think a lot of the time, typically, for men, it's that midlife place in which, we've been ticking all these boxes and doing what we thought was the correct way to live in the world, and yet something in us is, you know has a sense of living that quiet life of desperation, that something in us
Mm,
is not being fed and not being attended to, and we are the only ones that can do that for ourselves.
yeah.
And I think there's the extremes that we see in the world, like so much of the noise that's been going on lately and what's been coming out into the collective awareness, and then, the rogue leaders we see in the world who are perpetuating ugliness, and all of those attributes of the human being that are ugly. um and to me, it just speaks volumes of what is not being attended to, the lack of wisdom in our culture. It's like we've forgotten how to attend to ourselves. We've forgotten, we don't have elders here anymore. um and at the same time, I feel like, with people like you and other people I see in the world, I see elders being born again. I see that coming back. And look, maybe I live in a microcosm because like I lean into looking for people who are building their capacity to sit in the fire of what is difficult and uncomfortable within themselves and within the world. And I really admire that, and I feel a solace in that, and I feel a
Mhm.
capacity for myself to be seen in that also. To have connection that is rich and is rewarding, and is necessary. I feel like, because so much of what we experience in the world is surface level, you know is not attuning to something deeper, is not recognizing that there is an immense beauty that wants to spill into the world.
Yeah, so beautifully said, Michael. I feel it's like almost like humanity, where we've almost like lost our humanity over the last whatever number of years, and I feel so much hope as well in the spaces I see. The courage and tenacity and bravery of people meeting themselves in those parts, and sharing the realness and the authentic self or way of being. Um, but that's the thing I feel about, the healing journey as well, for a lot of people, that it is a journey. There's no quick fixes, and um that there's such a beauty in that. It kind of goes against like what modern society is about, and that healing journey is ultimately coming home to yourself. And yeah, I love being around people who are in that journey, on that journey. I don't think it ever fully end. I'm not quite sure.
I know. I think it's pretty clear it doesn't. And like that's so much of the beauty of it is meeting the brokenness within ourselves,
Yeah.
and creating a relationship that allows us to be where we are. And it's a very humbling experience to meet your shadow and to meet those places that are discordant and those places that have created suffering in our lives, and to be able to integrate them, to be able to meet them and have conversation with them, to be able to ultimately love them and recognize that we're all having this human experience. And being human, part of that experience is a brokenness. And part of it is also that light that each of us has. And I think the more you attune to one, the more the other then shines also.
Hmm.
Um, and I also like, and it's the only way I can really sit with the world and the way the world is this sense that we've been on this journey of the guy use, and I always struggled with this because obviously growing up in Ireland, and I was brought up Roman Catholic, and I was an altar boy, and I went to a Catholic school, and at some point I realized this is kind of fucked. And I
Mm.
really struggled with using the word God, for instance.
Yeah.
And I've reached a point where I use the word God a lot, and in and for me, and people can put in other words, universe, energy, awareness, benevolence, but for me, we're on this experiment of moving away from God, moving away from our essence, moving away from our source, to experience what that separation does, so that we can choose. We can choose. Do we lean back into this? Do we explore this within ourselves? And that for me is a beautiful journey that, ultimately the gift is remembering that the source of love that maybe I didn't receive or feel like I didn't receive is in me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's my journey, is to continuously remind myself that I'm what I'm looking for. God is, or like the deepest part of me, or God, or whatever word again you want to use. That's the source of the love that I that I long for. And I think all of even the heinousness we see in the world, in some respect, is those parts of people who are desperately wanting something and just doing it in the wrong ways, doing it in ways that, you know, they feel like will fill them up or give them some solace or stop the pain or whatever.
Yeah, it's a real externalization and, domination just to try and get what they want. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah, a pretty big disaster. But yeah, I love that idea around God, and it's, you know, yeah, I really feel like there's a kind of a not real yeah, religious, spiritual, maybe vacuum at the moment, where people have been so disconnected to their own spirituality or essence or whatever terminology they want to put on it.
Mm.
Sense of self. Um, and yeah, that's a really, really great way of looking at it. It's like, do we need to go so far away from it that we go, oh, maybe we'll come back a little bit to it,
Yeah.
towards it? And I definitely feel like here in Ireland, and I don't know, maybe it's also the bubble I'm in, but a lot of people are moving towards, nature-based spirituality, shamanism, connection to the
Mm.
land, connection to power places, sacred times of the year. It's like we're kind of
Mm.
seeking more of that through our environment and through community, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. No, listen, absolutely. Like, I think as you take a journey, that journey inward, and you begin to really have a deeper sense of our essential nature, it is woven through the land, and it is woven through, like, we are not separate from that.
Hmm.
And yet, conceptually, we've grown up in that culture that is individualistic and boundaried. And, like, I often talk about the idea of growing up in South County Dublin and having four walls or four hedges around us, and we didn't really communicate with our neighbors. And even at a young age, having a sense of there's something fucking off here.
Mm.
And maybe that, maybe it's true to say that there, in some respects, has been an effort, a concerted effort, to disrupt community, to break down those places in which we would have traditionally resourced ourselves, and come back to a sense of something deeper, or, had practices that were community based, that were around clearing ourselves. Like, we're so porous, we're continuously absorbing what is in our environs. And if that is, discordant or toxic, or, we're going to be carrying that stuff around. And our culture
Hmm.
doesn't just doesn't have methods of recognizing that or acknowledging that, or, and, like, I think, like, the big things on the world stage are unfortunately they're there, but they are an incredible example of how that happens. Like the whole Israeli Gaza thing of, thinking that a bunch of people are the devil and need to all be killed, and babies need, like, that, to me, screams volumes of when we're not really attending to our inner world, or when our inner world is being actively manipulated,
Hmm.
that we as humans can do fucking awful things. And yet,
Yeah.
you know, when we do begin to listen, and I think so much of what we're asked to do at the moment in the world is to listen, to really awaken that capacity to listen, to be still, to listen, to listen. And part of it is what we will meet is our own pain and our own suffering, and that's difficult. And I understand why we want to avoid that. And yet it's also the fuel and the food that will take us deeper and create deeper transformation. Um, and I hope, I was thinking about this the other day. It's very easy to look into the world and to really despair. But I feel like it only needs a certain amount of us who are doing the work, and the tipping point will be there. It's like the TM community did those experiments back in the 80s where they got groups of people meditating together and watched crime rates in the cities surrounding the meditators dropping. So that idea that we only need a certain
Mm.
percentage of people who are willing to explore becoming, to changing vibrationally, that again, if we're part of this bigger matrix of life, that when we begin to affect our own frequency, that it affects the frequency around us. So,
Hmm.
and I think there's studies and statistics that back that those ideas up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fully on board with the idea of, if we do the change internally for ourselves, it affects everything in our environment and around us, and then that spreads out. I think one of my teachers has said, like, we only need 1% of the world population to wake
Yeah.
up to start to create a difference and get the ball rolling. And I do feel
Yeah.
very hopeful that that is happening.
Yeah.
Particularly around, you kind of had said it earlier about, more elders coming in. I
Mm.
really feel like this is a huge piece of the puzzle. And one of the reasons I want to have you on the podcast as well, because I know you and Dermot are doing great work. And what is the benefit of being around other men who have walked through the fire, been on this path, just being in their company? Um, I feel like there's been such a disconnection, even in my own life. Like, I think my whole life I had very little connection with anybody who was, say plus 70, other than say my grandparents. It's like the elderly people, elders or
Mm.
not elders, from a wisdom tradition or whatever, just elderly people who do have wisdom were just cut
Yeah.
off. It's like the old people from society were cut off. And yeah, it's probably a consequence of these, four walls and four hedges. I also grew up in that in South Dublin too. And there's just been this, whether it's conscious or unconscious, disconnection in society and community, and especially from elders. So yeah, I'd love you to maybe speak into a little bit of that.
Yeah, like I think there, over the course of history, there was a concerted effort by certain forces to dismantle wisdom traditions that were there, and persecute. We know about witch trials and all those different big events that happened over the course of history in which traditional wisdoms were targeted and annihilated. So we, for whatever reason, have needed to go through this period in which, you know, the avenue to the divine was through shame and guilt, and you needed to communicate with God through a priest. And he was, like all of what we see in terms of and I think all of it has been this process of trying to control people, of trying to disempower and control people. For whatever reasons. But I feel like we're at this point at which so many people are really beginning to wake up and claim something back within themselves. And then be a light for others. And I was reading a little piece around the manosphere, and somebody making the point that these kids that are kind of being absorbed into that way of seeing the world, they're not being created by this manosphere group, but they're being targeted because
Mm.
they're lonely. They're alone. They have that sense of loneliness. And I know, like, I would have had that too. And when I, over the course of my life, have been in my really triggered spaces, that has been the overriding feeling of I'm fucking totally alone. I'm totally alone. And I think maybe what elders have a capacity to do, like I feel like an elder is somebody who can sit in the discomfort, of their own discomfort initially, but then the discomfort of the world, to can sit in it and build their capacity, their container to be able to let what needs to move through them. And I think that has a resonance in it, and that has a comfort in it. And, it's why people would have been attracted to gurus
Hmm.
because there's a sense of, they're able to pick up that sense of, of depth, of presence, of, that just hasn't been, because our culture has been so wounded, and we haven't really had the opportunity up until this point in a bigger way to really process a lot of the pain that's been in there. So, I remember the first time I went drinking was like one of the first times I felt really at ease, and in retrospect, realizing that, the pain that I'd normalized just by growing up in the culture I grew up in, and having a drink was like, oh, it was an exit. It was an exit of that pain. It was like suddenly I was exploring camaraderie and connection in a way I hadn't. And even that, as a kind of I can understand why our culture in particular took to drink, because there is so much pain that is unacknowledged and normalized, and parts of us that are crying out to in some way alleviate that pain, not to feel it, even though consciously we might be getting on with it and, being men and being stoic and all of these. There's part of us that is screaming to be held, to feel loved, to feel safe, to feel met. And we're just not really doing that. And I think I think that's what an elder does first and foremost. Most is they attend to those parts within themselves that are asking to be held, that are asking to feel safe, and they're saying, "I've got you." They're
Hmm.
saying, I'm gonna fucking, you're safe. I'm gonna hold you, and I'm gonna feel what I need to feel in order to do that." And because we're so porous, and because we're all, we may have different stories, but we're all moving through similar stuff. We're all like, there's the same initiations that are going on for all of us. So I think to find people in the world who are genuinely doing that work and holding space for themselves first and foremost, and then I think out of that a compassion grows, a desire for us to grow together, to create a better world. That bodhisattvic idea of, we're here, part of our journey is here to support each other, to walk
Hmm.
each other home, and that's a lot of what happens with the nature of man stuff. We kind of just show up and we create a space, we create a space, and we, what I do is I invite God in, I invite the divine in, I invite the magic in, and it's trying to work through all of us, and in those spaces maybe we begin to give ourselves more permission to down tools, in terms of the parts of us that are continuously trying to fix it, or to control it, or to, those parts that are coming out of that part that doesn't feel safe, that are or continuously orientating us in the world. And we kind of begin to give that part permission to just, to strike, to stop, just to feel, to listen, to notice. And then, life wants to move through each of us. That's what we are. We're conduits for life. Like, life wants to express itself in its unique ways through each of us. And if we have an opportunity to be in spaces that allow us or support us in, even vibrationally, it's like we don't even need to get it at times. It's like to be in a frequency that is calling in, that has a sacredness to it. You think about how much of a lack of sacredness we have in our day-to-day lives, in our culture, where it's been stripped out of nature, or it's been, put into these old men who are not to say that there aren't incredible priests out there who are deeply spiritual people, but a lot of them aren't, and I would have grown up around a lot of them, and they weren't. They were very lost, very wounded people.
Hmm.
And we were looking to grow spiritually in way, through these avenues that were just not going to support that.
Yeah.
But,
Hmm.
that's the game, that's the journey, that's the dance. It's like you have to get lost before you find yourself. and unfortunately, pain is often the way in which that happens. And I feel like and it's not that I want to, I want there to be the suffering that's there. I don't want the suffering to be there, but if
Mm.
it's there, let's fucking use it to wake up a little bit more. Let's feel what it allows us to access within ourselves, and
Hmm.
it does. Like I think if we're, I always think of that, and you probably know it, that Terence McKenna, he's sitting in the forest and he's talking about the idea that it's just going to get madder and madder and
Yeah,
madder.
weirder and
You know
weirder.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's where we're going.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, totally. So like how can we be together to be in the weird and like and acknowledge it all? And I think that's one of the first once it's the first not precepts of Buddhism where it's like there is suffering, like there is suffering in the world. It's there. Can we
Yeah.
acknowledge it? Can we work with it? Can we support each other? And I know for myself, like this work that we do as men and also as women, it kind of dissolves the barriers of separation, and you see, oh, this person is just like me. They have the same issues, maybe at different times. Maybe, I'm on a journey that they'll go on in 10 years' time, or they were already on a journey I'm on right now. And there is a deep, I think, connection in that. And I feel like that's what we're kind of missing in society. We're missing those kind of connection points with people where it's real and it's authentic and it's raw, and there's a deep humanness in seeing each other and being seen and being witnessed.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of one of the I've had a lot of discussions about the manosphere thing, but one of the main things I really took away from a lot of the discussions was really the need for positive male spaces. I think women have women's spaces, and we have to have spaces together, but there has to be spaces for men to be around positive other men and to be seen and to share and to be supported in feeling.
Yeah.
So I think the work that you are doing is amazing. Um, and what kind of themes are you seeing at the moment in your spaces?
Um, God, we see a lot of different stuff, but it's a lot of people who have lost who've lost meaning. Who
Yeah,
just are kind of going through the motions, and this is with family, and with those intimate relationships with partners, with work, in which the that sense of I'm not really sure why I'm doing this. I can't
yeah.
really tap into joy, or I'm just doing what I have to do, and it's a bit of a struggle. And so I suppose it's the hope that there is something deeper, that there is more, there is a meaning there, and it's a way of, the spaces are a resource to begin to reawaken or reconnect with that part. And part of it just means that there's, I think when we go into those places of being numb and not feeling a deeper sense of meaning or purpose, it's a layer that's asking to be felt, and it just it's coming out in the ways that we've traditionally, like, again, it's so much of it is we're so porous, and we've been told to be a particular way, and frankly it's just a fucking lie.
Mm,
Like a lot of the ways in which men have been told to be in the world has been to get men to shut up and to do their work and to just, you know get on with it. And
yeah.
and in some respect, and the idea of having a man's space is because internally there's so much wounded child inside all of us, and it's such a vulnerable piece to begin to awaken to and to lean into. It's like, so, like, in those spaces where it's just men, you really very quickly you realize that we're all in the same boat. We're all going through the same stuff. We're all carrying these wounds. And even that alone is like, it's like your shoulders can drop. It's like,
Mm,
oh, fuck, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Because so much of that story with men is that lone wolf, that I'm alone, and if you don't get it, somebody else will, and we're pitted against each other. And then we have, the whole fucking relationship with women, which is such a messy piece. It's so like the mother wound and all of this stuff. It's such a messy piece, and for so many of us as men, it's such a performative arena where we put on, whatever we put on around them because, we've never left our moms and we're still looking to suckle on the tit, and we're, all of these ambiguities and distortions. So to step out of having to deal with any of that allows us to begin to just drop into a sense of safety around other men, because very quickly that sense of safety can be built. It doesn't take much practice and much sitting together to begin to feel safe around each other, because we're naturally like there's probably far more history in sitting in those spaces as men within healthier communities in which there was a deep sense of safety, a deep sense of holding each other, of witnessing each other, than there is in the last whatever couple of thousand years of that being broken up and broken down. So something in us remembers. It's like when we go into those situations in which it might be the first time in our life we've sat in that space, and yet something very deep within us recognizes the space, knows the space,
Yeah.
and recognizes the resource of it, the reward of it, the richness of it. So men, by the end of the weekend, like there is a light in men's eyes, and the way Dermot put it beautifully over the last retreat is, we're growing again. We're growing. We stagnated. We stopped because we've capped out at living the way we've been living, and then there's this part that cracks open, and suddenly there's that piece that is alive, that is growing again. There's a lightness in the experience and a capacity to, I've got this, that capacity to kind of be with what is uncomfortable. We're not trying to push it away. We're trying to actually turn toward it and
Hmm.
recognize it for what it is as part of the human condition and experience. And then remember, we have all these resources. We have life itself as we open to it, but we also have brotherhood. We have like rich supportive connection with other men, which is like think how wounded that is in our culture. It's like how we've been manipulated to hold ideas around other men and competition, and that's just simply do not feed us. They just drain our energy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite like the word that comes to me is like quite disempowering. We've really been disempowered as men, and yeah, really pitted against each other, and um, kind of distrust. Like there's like a distrustfulness, in other men and being vulnerable and sharing that vulnerability and being able to access that vulnerability around others, and break down and be held. And I've been very fortunate that I've had many experiences of being held and being supportive, and they've been some of the most transformational, like bigger than the psychedelic work.
Yeah.
Being held by a group of men, in your darkest moment, or your deepest trauma, or struggles. And there's, yeah, really, I think there's something really, really beautiful in that. And for me, another kind of feeling comes in of intimacy. It's like we've lost intimacy with other men, intimacy in the, I see you and you see me, and it's a beautiful connection, not a sexual connection, but a beautiful connection in terms of like, well, we can really be there with our fullness and all of each other, and just be happy and be connected and be compassionate and kind.
Yeah. Yeah, look, and we're wired to do that. Like, obviously we've been told whatever we've been told over the last, what we've grown up in, but we are wired to do this work in community. That's just the
Hmm.
way human beings are wired. And into that piece of disempowerment, like the phrase that's been coming to me lately is take your seat at the table.
Mm,
Take your seat at the table.
love
Take your
that.
seat at the table. Yeah. You know, and I think, you know, like those spaces offer us this opportunity to be witnessed by the other, but fundamentally we're meeting ourselves. Fundamentally it's the exiled parts of ourselves that we, whether it's this life or the next or the next or the next, that's what we're here to do. We're here to integrate our entire being. We're here to meet all of those places that have been shamed and locked away and rejected and ignored and criticized and blamed. All of those places need to come home. All of those places need to be held by the part of us that has the capacity to do that. So the adult in us. Like even I was thinking about that, with what we're seeing with the fucking the abuse website and the fucking WhatsApp groups and the and what came to me was that's not men doing that. That's not what a man is.
Mm-hmm.
That's wounded boys in men's bodies. It's not what a man is. Like being a man, like being a woman, is a sacred thing. Like it is the recognition of what is sacred within us. I think that's an intrinsic part of what it is to move into the maturity of what being a man. And look, I think we're all a fucking work in progress. We're all learning to meet these parts of ourselves that are in pain and build our capacity to go, okay, I'm going to sit with this. And
Mm.
that might mean I've, like for me over the years, like my strategies of getting stoned or watching TV or objectifying women or, or back in the day drinking more or, all of these patterns that are in some respect my way of dealing with pain, which is not dealing with it, which is, it's just they were the ways that that I learned. Like I grew up with alcoholism in the house. I grew up with violence in the house, and they were the coping mechanisms, and they need to be loved and honored and recognized that they were a way in which I survived.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is this opportunity, I think, as we grow and mature, to experience that we can do more than survive, and it is edgy work to meet those parts that are in pain and to sit with them and to wait for them. Like I have places that I'm waiting. Like they'll show themselves when they're ready, but they might say, I don't fucking trust you yet. So and my job is to, and it's not it's like I feel the gravity of it is to go, I'm going to be trustworthy for you. I'm going to be trustworthy for these places, so I can really be that in the world, first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost for myself, and then for wherever that trust is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Beautifully said, and I feel like we're missing rites of passage and initiatory practices for us to be able to make those transitions into boy to man. And I also feel like, yeah, maybe what kind of comes to me is around these kind of coping strategies that, yes, they were so important and helped us survive at certain points, but as we get older, sometimes they start to weigh us down, and
yeah.
they're causing us to numb out. And yes, they were helpful, but now they're just inhibiting us from growth. And maybe there's something about, the initiatory practices helping us with that. But I think also just being around good men and being in positive
Mm,
spaces does for
mm,
sure. When we
yeah,
start to identify, recognize them, have compassion and kindness towards those parts, and then start the journey of like rewiring or rebuilding, building ourselves internally. Um, I also really love that point you said. It's so sacred to be a man, or to be a woman, and I also feel as well for the role of the father too. Men can be, if your child is born, you become a father, but I think there's a process, and something I've been through is you have to like want to be the father, and you have to put in the energy and the effort, and um go into those deep parts to embody what does the father actually mean. We have our own fathers, which give us a blueprint, but then there's this bigger father energy, archetypal transpersonal father, um and that's also a beautiful initiation, and one that's been very difficult in my life,
mm,
but I'm very grateful for it.
mm.
um yeah, maybe I'd love you to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah. Like I remember when I had my first boy, who's now 22, and I remember I was working at the time, and I remember I'd come home and Maggie, his mom, who'd been with him all day, and I'd come home and I'd have this sense of wanting my slippers and my dinner.
Yeah.
And Maggie was great, and she was like, "Fuck that! Here's the child." Uh, but what dawned on me was it's like there's in the ether there's these unconscious programs swimming around, and it was this old school father program that I just absorbed, and uh, like that. I think in our unconsciousness, it's easy we're downloading again this idea of being so porous. We're downloading stuff that's in the ether. If it's been around long enough and been a certain way long enough, it's accessible. And Maggie being Maggie and handing me the child and going, I'm not making your fucking dinner. I've been with the kid, So it gave me this opportunity to really explore, how do I be present to this experience? How do I show up in the way fatherhood is meant to come through me? In my
Mm.
expression of fatherhood. And look, it's been a journey, but I find particularly with my youngest boy who's now 6. And particularly after doing really really attending to my inner world more and more and more, that there's such a quality of, like, when I'm with him, I just down tools. I don't do anything except be with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with that with my older boy for time, because I was trying to get stuff done and try to do this and that and the other. And I realized at some point I'm not doing anything else when I'm with my boy. I'm just being, and I, and as a result, I look forward. It's playtime, and not that it's not, has its moments where it's trying and it's difficult but it is this opportunity to be present. And again, this is the same point, is the more I attend to those parts of myself that are fearful, that are untrusting, the more I become trustworthy for him and safe for him. And I become that protective being in his life that is able to say, like, we have conversations every day that I'm with him around how much he is loved as he is, in all his moments. He'll have his moments where he'll have a meltdown and he might recoil, but we move into repair so beautifully again and again and again. And I know the gravity of those experiences for me, but for him, because I never had repair in those situations as a
Mm.
child. And I developed this deep experience of aloneness that has been a very difficult piece to traverse, and many years of numbing out to deal with it, to survive around it. So if I can in some way be a way in which he doesn't have to do that, like he can do the next, evolutionary step. He doesn't need to go into those mires of deep aloneness, because he is continuously reminded, both verbally and energetically, that he is held, that he is loved as he is, whatever way he is. If he wants to fucking have a tantrum in the middle of Super Quinn, fucking go for it. I'll be there waiting. Whenever you're ready, I'm there.
Mm.
Um, so it is a journey. And then, again, I think, being in community with other fathers, being around other fathers, like we've done father son stuff. Um, that is, again, it's a huge resource, and it's how really we are wired. We're wired to support each other in these endeavors, and it's probably part of the reason that parenting is so difficult, particularly if you're in that single parent situation. Um, like, I live on a piece of land, and there's a friend's family. He's got 2 daughters, and then somebody else just moved into an apartment on the land, and he's got 2 daughters. So my little fella comes down here, and he's just like, shoes are off, and he's just running wild, and he's learning to cycle with the other kids. And there's just, there's just nature and woods and trees. And so that piece of community is like, it's such a piece that we really need to explore. How do we bring that back in? And I know
Mm.
often, women have traditionally been better at maintaining that, because they've maintained they've maintained more emotional savviness, or more emotional awareness. Maybe that's more of the essence of the feminine, whereas we've sacrificed that as men. I think our relationship to our feminine has been deeply wounded, and as a result, our relationship to women has been deeply wounded.
Yeah.
But, like even with that stuff that's been coming out over the last number of weeks, and what we see of political male role models in the world, like, if we're not using all of that to wake up more deeply ourselves, to feel more deeply, and if we're not just feeling like how fucking awful it is, you know, I think it'll only get worse until
Mm.
we begin to pay attention.
Yeah.
And this is the piece that, like, I've really, like, over the last, like, the piece I'm currently working on is that inner predator piece. That piece of looking into the world and going, well, where is this in me?
Yeah.
Where is the potential in me? Where is the root of that in me? Where is that wound in me that needs my attending? That needs me to really fucking show up. And that's our culture, is like the devil is over here. You hear it in the language of the Americans talking about the evilness of the Iranian. Like, it's like all of that tendency to externalize the devil, to externalize the shadow, to externalize the darkness.
Hmm.
And each of us is light and shadow. And until we learn how to get comfortable with our own shadow and start walking that path, nothing in the external, I don't think, will change. I think it'll just get worse and worse, because it's trying to show us. It's trying to show us who we are and what this human experience is, and what we're invited to awaken to and integrate. And in the integration, then there's such beauty. There's such, like, when we can sit with our own shadow, and it's fucking humbling work, but when we can sit with our own shadow, it's like there is such gratitude
Hmm.
within each of us. Like, it's the ground floor of our being is gratitude. It's like, for nothing except being, there is, like, profound gratitude. Like, I was lying on the grass this morning in the sun. Now I'm lying on the grass and I'm in the sunshine, so there is reason there for it. But it is this sense of, there's this deep gratitude that I'm so grateful to have access to. And I know a huge piece of that is because I'm going, okay, I'm, as things arise, and they arise in the time that they're ready to arise. And I feel like the last big work I did was around this piece of my relationship to the feminine, and the part of me that is unsafe, like,
Mm.
really having to me, and really sitting with the noise of it, the internal noise, the discordantness of it, of it, but giving myself permission to do that, and giving myself some time. It was like a sense of, like, you get to drop into something deeper within yourself that has been hidden. It's been locked away and hasn't even been safe enough to show itself to the part that maybe just wasn't ready to hold it.
Yeah.
So I have this sense of, like, both gratitude, and it speaks to me of the work I've done, because the part that hasn't feel safe is now saying, okay, I'm going to show you me. I'm going to let you see what you've been carrying that has been in pain and playing out in the world.
Mm.
So it's the recognition that I'm learning how to hold that pain. And I'm so grateful, because it's more of me comes online,
Mm.
more of me is accessible, more of my resources are available. All the energy that is being wrapped up in protecting and hiding and covertness, and it's all very subtle stuff. It's not overt stuff. It's subtle and it's hidden away. But as it opens up, it's like, the language I use is, I let the light of God in. I let like, or you can say whatever way you want to describe it, but it's like those. It's like I'm letting the landlord back in the house. I'm opening doors, and the light is getting in, and breath is getting in, and I'm getting to meet the pain that's in there. And it's not that maybe the pain goes away, but it changes, because I'm holding it now. It
Mm.
becomes a resource. It becomes, a reason to be humble and to be present and to be grateful. And at times it requires sitting in the soup and the murkiness, in the discordantness, in the meeting the parts that want to be perfect and want to get it right, And it feels like a very human experience. It feels like a very human, grounding way of being present in the world. And, you know, the mind can jump in, I think, and catastrophize. And I think that's what we do with particularly looking at the world around us. But I feel like the more we meet those shadowy places in ourselves, we can sit in the shadow, we can sit in it, and we can bring light to it. We
Mm.
bring, you know, it's like we're opening that door, and it's like the Leonard Cohen, you know, it's those cracks that let the light in.
Yeah, absolutely. I could listen to you all day, Michael. um, yeah, I fully agree, and I also feel it. You know, it's all there. It's already there. It's all within us. You know,
Mm.
and so many people are just on the external seeking for their sense of self or purpose or happiness or fulfillment. And yeah, also the shadows there, and to feel the shadow for me, and the darker parts and the stickier parts. That's what it is to be a fully rounded, beautiful
Yeah,
human being. And if
yeah,
we don't, it just leaks out in unconscious ways. Um, I love all the work of Carl Jung, and he kind of says, all the unconscious parts that will just make us live our lives in a way that we're not even aware of until we actually sit with it and face it and move through it and understand it. And yeah, I love that. Let in the light. Let in the awareness, or be with it and feel it. Oh, absolutely, absolutely love that point. Um, and what's gonna? I know we're coming to the hour now, so what's kind of coming up for you over the next while?
we have a men's retreat coming up at the end of May up in Donegal. So that's the kind of the next piece. We have a father and son retreat coming up in the summer.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, 12 to 14 year olds. Um, we're back in the autumn, and then I'm tipping away with doing. I've just started kind of teaching. I stopped for the COVID, for like the COVID period, and when we had initially met, actually, um, and the years after that, like from my mid 40s was like something in me really broke. Um,
Mm.
I could say broke open. We could say, you know, you could say break down in one lens, and you could say break through in another. But it was a long time breaking through. But I really had to meet parts of myself that I wasn't aware in any sense that they were there. They were very covert operating systems, and so I've really been on that journey. And part of what I had to do was drop a lot of the identities that I'd been holding on to. So being a yoga teacher um, was one of them. So I stopped teaching yoga, and had just in the last 6 months started doing that again, and leading retreat. I've got a retreat in the autumn in Morocco, and um, so I'm just starting to get back into doing a bit of that work and really appreciating it, and yeah, loving being in those spaces. So yeah.
Beautiful, Michael. Well, thanks so much for your time and for this wonderful conversation. I really hope that people tune in and take what they need from it. I feel a lot of hope, meeting men like you in the world and knowing other men, especially here in Ireland as well, doing really great work. That it's
Mm.
kind of like the antidote to these disgusting spaces of manosphere and young
Yeah,
men being
yeah,
radicalized. So,
yeah,
I really hope that this work gets out more. And
yeah.
I've heard of some suicides recently in some friend groups, and it just breaks my heart to think that men are in isolation and feeling alone and are holding carrying these burdens, and that they, if they just had an opportunity to be in one of these spaces, or to meet an elder or have some sort of guidance, that they could start that journey.
Look, it's an important piece, and I think particularly at the moment, because I feel like there's a lot of hurt out there. You know, a lot of sensitive women who really are feeling the hurt of what has been going on. You know, the really heinous behavior that a lot of men have been perpetrating in the world, and I viscerally feel like I feel the discomfort of that being like, I was walking down the street bringing the little fella to school the other day, and there was a woman with a pram walking in front of me and another woman walking toward her, and they had a lovely interaction in front of me. I saw them smiling at each other, and I kind of smiled at the woman to say hello, and I got this kind of scowl, and it was this sense of, this is what fucking a lot of women think of men at the moment, you know.
Mm.
Uh, and the human part of me, it finds that difficult, and I also understand that, you know, pain has its process, it has its journey, and my kind of, my philosophy in a sense, or my way of dealing with it was like, kind of just shut the fuck up and let them have their process. Like,
Mhm.
they need to go through what they need to go through. But I also, you know, men are trying to work it out, and you have men who are certainly making very, very poor decisions and creating a lot of suffering in the world. And then you have other men who are trying their best, you know, and I think there is an ancient wound in us as men in terms of not feeling full, you know, not like there's something missing, and I think that's so much of what initiates a lot of suffering in our lives, be it the quiet suffering or be it the overt suffering when you're out there fucking vomiting on people, vomiting on women. Um, but I do feel it's important to make that statement that men are, like, being a man is a sacred process. It's a sacred, it's a way in which life, the sacredness of life, shows up in the world, and we're trying to work it out, you know. And I think the more we come together and we put our hands up and we're willing to be vulnerable, and I think the truth is vulnerability is real strength, is really putting yourself in a position in which you're showing a part of yourself that is scary to show because you've been wounded by showing it before, or, you know. I think that's the work we're being asked to do, and I think the riches that are waiting for us to experience are, they're needed. They're just, the
Mhm.
world needs men. It needs sacred men. It needs us. Like, it's part of the whole fucking soup. We are needed. So the more of us that are willing to meet our stuff and to show up, yeah, that gives
Mm.
me fucking real hope. That gives me real
Mm.
hope.
No, beautiful, Michael. What a beautiful, yeah, statement to leave it on. And yeah, I really hope those men will find these spaces. Yeah, it's so needed. So yeah, Gurmila Maga, thank you so much for your work, for this wonderful conversation. Yeah, where can people find out about your work?
Natureofman.ie or michaelryan.yoga.
Great, thank you, Michael,
And
and
thank you, Dara, as well, like, for all the work you do, man. You do fucking beautiful work in the world. So, yeah, thank you, man.
appreciate it. So yeah, and thank you to all the listeners if you made it this far. Yeah, I really appreciate you being here with me again this week. And yeah, if you enjoyed the episode, please make sure to give it a share, drop your thoughts in the comments. And until next time, yeah, peace and love. Take care.